Today on the podcast, I want to bring you some really interesting news out of China, and that is that they have essentially set some stricter rules for training generative AI models. And the reason why I think this is important is because, China's not the same as maybe some other countries, for example, like the European Union, how when they make changes or regulations, it one way or another, it's going to trickle through and impact the United States and a lot of other countries. China's a little bit different in a sense that we don't always follow their lead, but many countries do, and a lot of people are looking at what's going on there. So I think it'd be interesting to see essentially the implications of what they're, proposing there, the rules that they're, putting into place, and how that might impact us, but also how it's going to impact the technology that comes out of China. Because even if no one, enacts or uses their strict rules, whatnot, we know that, they obviously are heavily focused on censorship and whatnot, based off of these rules. But even if we don't, follow those exactly, the technology that is created in China does get exported to other countries. Some of their AI models get used around the world for all sorts of different purposes. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that impact plays out. But this is what we're going to be talking about on the podcast. So let's dive into it. Welcome to the world's #1 AI podcast, AI Chat. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. Make sure that you go to AIbox.ai, link in the show notes, to join the waitlist for our new AI platform. We're going to be launching an incredible platform that allows you to build anything you want with workflows in AI. So you're able to chain together ChatGPT and image generators and audio generators to make really powerful apps for your organization, or you can host them on our marketplace and actually generate royalties from them. So make sure to go to AIbox.ai and join the waitlist. In addition, if you like the podcast, if you could do me a massive favor and please leave us a review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcast. This helps me be able to get better guests on here as they check the reviews to see how you guys are liking it. So if you could please do that, I would really, really appreciate it. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. China has recently unveiled a set of draft security regulations aimed at companies that are essentially offering AI services. So this encompasses a bunch of stringent restrictions on the data sources used for training AI models. And these regulations, I think they were actually proposed by the National Information Security Standardization Committee. So that essentially is just like a body which is made up of a bunch of representatives from the cyberspace administrations of China and also the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology. And then I think there's a bunch of different like law enforcement agencies that China kind of mixes in with that. But in any case, generative AI, of course, super popular right now. And all of it is, ChatGPT and everything else, it essentially gets its power by analyzing historical data and generating new content, right? It sucks in all this data and it spits out your AI-generated content. And that's the same for text, images, videos coming soon, all that kind of stuff. So one of the key recommendations that was recently put forth by this Chinese committee is a requirement for a security evaluation of the content used to train publicly accessible generative AI models. So I think what's notable in all of this is that they said, quote, in regard to kind of content, they said, quote, 5% of the form of unlawful and detrimental information, so if there's more than that in the data set that they discover, will be categorized for blacklisting. This category encompasses content that promotes terrorism, violence, subversion of the socialist system, damage to the nation's reputation, and actions that undermine national cohesion and societal stability. So this is so interesting, right? China's essentially saying, if we review your data used to train your AI model and more than 5% of it could be labeled as content that is against our values, then you're going to get blacklisted and probably banned, and your AI won't be able to be used. Now, what's interesting is their values that they stated there. Of course, terrorism, I think everyone can agree to that. But I think the problem with the terrorism is that that's kind of been one of their big one of their big things they've used to essentially justify the Uyghurs in China and the entire, that horrible atrocity that's going on, where they're essentially imprisoning them, torturing them, murdering them, all of the stuff that's going on there in China to the Uyghur Muslim population, is a lot of it's just based off of the context that they're all terrorists. And so that obviously concerning. The second thing that's concerning is, of course, subversion of the socialist system. So China's, Communist Party obviously would like to remain in power and would like everyone to say that it's good. And the way they do that is not by having the best ideas or the best system, but by shutting down free speech around it, shutting down conversations. And so I think it's fairly obvious when you see, if you're trying to subvert our way of thinking, then you're going to get blacklisted, obviously, or not even if you're trying to subvert it, but if the ideas that are included are trying to, then it gets blacklisted. I think what's interesting in all of this is, like, obviously ChatGPT is sucking in like data from all over the world, from all different places, all different perspectives. And I think it's good to have a lot of different perspectives on the different things. I think it's really useful and interesting when you're talking with ChatGPT and I'm like, hey, this is my political opinion, or this is my ideological thing that I subscribe to on this topic. But talk to me from someone with a different viewpoint and tell me like why they believe what they believe. I think like doing that is something that's really helped me to kind of get different, understand different people's point of views. So often we're in echo chambers in our own social media. We have all of our own, biases that are constantly being validated by the stuff we subscribe to, regardless of what that is. And so I think, doing something like that is really useful for getting different perspectives. And perhaps obviously all of my opinions are not correct. There's probably a bunch of my opinions that are just flat out wrong. And I would sure like to know that, right? I'd like to get new facts. I would like to get new evidence. I'd like to help shape my opinions based off of new information. I think everyone should have an open mind in that way, not dig your heels in on one specific thing just because you decided to dig your heels in on it. But the problem is with these types of legislation, these type of rules, like for example, coming out of China, if you cannot have a dissenting opinion on a topic be included into language models for training, it's really hard for that language model to give that side of the argument or that side of the story in any of its outputs. And so, of course, there's people that have complained about ChatGPT and how, different guardrails or biases might be injected by the trainers. But imagine if the guardrails were literally that you just ripped out ideologies right out of all of the training data. I think that would have a very profound impact on the AI coming out of it. And furthermore, when you think about China shipping this technology all around the world, right? Let's say they make some AI models, any AI model that was based out of China. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm not going to use the Baidu chat thing. That's silly. I'm just going to use good AI models. Okay. I understand your concept there. But the problem is, I think a lot of these AI models are going to get very commoditized. We don't even think about it, but you're going to buy a GPS from China, or you're going to buy some gizmo or gadget, like we buy everything, your DJI drone from China, and everything is going to have AI embedded into it. So when you're talking to your DJI drone, I know that's such a random example, but you're talking to your GPS and you're like, hey, GPS, what's the best way to get to blah, blah in Taiwan? And it's the best way to get to this place in Taiwan, which is a province of China owned by the Chinese Communist Party, is to go da-da-da-da-da. And it's going to tell you. I mean, I know that's a silly example, only one I can think off the top of my head. But what I'm trying to say is this AI gets commoditized and embedded into all different technology. So any software essentially getting shipped out of China now is going to be forced where all of the content and anything that gets spit out of it is going to be in line with the Chinese Communist Party, which is a lot of it is just completely wrong, but they just put it there so that they can remain in power and shut down any political dissonance. And yeah, of course, lots of terrible things happening. So that is my concern on this whole issue. And that's essentially China's stance. So these draft regulations also emphasize that data is subject to censorship on the Chinese internet, should not be employed as training materials for these models. Boom, right? So pretty much anything about, the uprisings in China that they've censored, anything that they've censored in China and on the Chinese internet, if you include that in your training models, you get banned or blacklisted. So essentially what it's doing is they won't even have to censor these AI models because none of the data that gets fed into them is against what they have already censored. So This development, I think, comes shortly after regulatory authorities granted permission to several Chinese tech companies, including Baidu, to introduce generative AI-driven chatbots to the general public. So China's pretty much just making sure they're like, look, we censored the whole internet, but we don't want you to be able to ask Baidu about, uprisings in China or reasons why communism might be bad in it to give you like a good reason or to give you the history that we've, spent so much time to erase essentially from public knowledge. So very interesting, very classic China. Since April, the CAC has consistently stressed the necessity for companies to provide security evaluations to regulatory bodies before making generative AI-powered services available to the public. Now, I will say not all of the things included in these Chinese bill is like specifically kind of like ominous. I just bring up some things I have concern with. I think a newly unveiled draft security stipulation also dictates that organizations engaged in training these AI models have to get consent from individuals whose personal data or biometric information is used for training purposes. That I think is great. No problem with that, right? If you're going to include my biometric data in your data set, I would really like to be able to opt out of that. Additionally, I think the guidelines include a bunch of comprehensive instructions on preventing infringements related to intellectual property. Interesting. China has, traditionally been a little bit lax on that. I think it's important to note that nations worldwide are definitely grappling with the establishment of regulatory frameworks for AI. China views AI as a critical domain in which it, aspires to compete with the United States, and it has a bunch of ambitious goals to become a global leader in the AI field by 2030. I think this move to regulate generative AI services is China really trying to flex their muscles on this. That being said, they're trying to become the global leader in AI by 2030. I fail to see their AI becoming very popular in the United States. I mean, I could be wrong. Maybe they're going to have some really cool tools that do some really cool things and everyone's going to want to use them for those reasons. But I think that's definitely an existential threat to democracy and, I don't know, true information. If you're getting these AI models that have a bunch of data that they're, banning you from including in the training set because it doesn't go along with their political ideologies. I think that's definitely not the AI models we would like to be using in the free world. So, that's my opinion on all of that. But it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out, what China continues to do to try to stay number one in AI, as it feels like it's competing with the United States right now. It'll be interesting to see who wins out. And I definitely could see. I don't think China's, not going to get any traction on this. I definitely see a world where perhaps America and some other nations are very strong with AI tools. And then you have countries like, China probably partnering with a handful of other countries, maybe places in Russia, maybe places in Africa that have a lot of ties to China. A lot of places, even in the South Pacific that I visited, have massive Chinese populations and Chinese investments. So China does have a lot of political muscle to flex. A lot of, ambassadors from all over the place. They give a lot of money. They got their Belt and Road Initiative. This could be something they try to roll out through things like that, where they try to essentially get their AI models embedded into other countries. So it'll be very interesting to see how it rolls out, and how the whole landscape plays out between America, China, and any other major AI players.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. That's the sound of switching your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling. Harness the best converting checkout and same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Stop leaving sales on the table. Discover why millions trust Shopify to build, grow, and run their business. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech23.
Thank you for listening to the AI Chat Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, I'd appreciate it if you rate me wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're looking for an innovative group of AI enthusiasts, make sure you check out our Discord channel and also our Facebook community. It's obviously a lot more interactive than a podcast, where we can actually share software tools, prompts that we're using in everyday AI. I'll leave a link for those in the description below.